Ladies and gentlemen, guys and goons, get ready for another episode of Reconnecting, our second episode. Thank you all for a great round of feedback and support on the first episode. So, because of that, we're going to stick with it. And plus, we're in quarantine. We have nothing better to do. We have an awesome show lined up today, and we will dive right into it because I can already tell that my co-hosts are squirming in their seats, and what better time to introduce them right now. So I am here. I'm Nick Mo or Chowda. And right below me in our Discord call is...
I am Ian Murphy, the pizza guy, screen name. And I am very excited today because I'm sure as it's about to be brought up, I'm ready to talk Valorant. So Marshall, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Marshall Brummel. I go by Hangry, and I guess we'll just get straight into how we feel about Valorant, right? Because Ian, you and I have gotten a chance to play it. So do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure thing. I will say initial impressions. I instantly knew I was going to be dumping stupid hours into this beta over quarantine. That was within the first hour of me playing the game, probably the first 10 minutes, the first competitive match I played. I knew I was ready to sink my teeth into it. I've picked up Omen, and I have just been having so much fun mind gaming people and just playing around with his mechanic. It feels so good, and the abilities feel like they fit really well into Valorant, maybe with the exception of some kits, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Raze has definitely been someone I've seen discussed in team chat. But first impressions, I am loving this game. Marshall, what are your first takes?
So I'll be honest, I played it and I was like, okay, this is a good game. But when I'm thinking about it, I was, of course, because how do you not compare it to Counter-Strike? My first thoughts were, would I rather play this or would I rather play Counter-Strike? And I would probably rather play this, but not by much.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what the weird it's the sounds of the game that do that to me. The sounds are not very rewarding, if that makes sense.
Are you talking about the sound effects themselves, like the sound of the op or like a kill, or are you talking more like the map sound?
It's more like the gun sounds. Everything feels weak. The headshot sound, great. The kill sound, cool. I like the little confirmation, but especially when I'm thinking about like the Phantom, I feel like I'm shooting peas. So I don't know. The sound's a little off. I definitely think like compared to like if you compare like the Phantom to like the AK or like the original AK sound in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, it's a big difference. So I've been kind of thrown off by that for a little while, but still giving it plenty of playing time. And I play Breach, so I found his kit very fun.
I'm sorry. Just to make sure I'm clear, the Phantom is isn't that supposed to be the M4 clone, and the Vandal is the AK? I just want to make sure we have those.
So I've been using the Phantom mostly, but when you compare the Vandal and the AK, my bad, I still think that the AK or even the original AK was like much more rewarding to fire.
I understand that. The thing is, in Counter-Strike, I was more apt to pick up an M4, but in Valorant, I've really found a home in the Vandal. So I think I might have just not been able to experience what you're talking about, but that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and I use the A1S in Counter-Strike, so between that and the Phantom, it's not very different.
Okay, yeah.
So I think if I were to chime in here too, and I'll try and play the perspective of the outsider here, because as we are recording right now, I have my Valorant stream open. And I am still trying to get my key drop. So, I mean, that's a whole topic of debate. Well, actually, I'll put it to bed right now. Valorant drops are a thing. Everyone's waiting. Stream numbers are inflated because of people like me who are just waiting for their chance to play the game. But to comment on one thing, too, having played a lot more shooters than I usually do over this quarantine period, usually I'm more of a strategy game kind of person. So lots of Hearthstone, League of Legends, even like Civ 5 was my game back in the day. Having a rewarding sound ecosystem in any game, but especially shooters, is really important for like the immersion and satisfaction, because I'll compare it to Rainbow Six, which has an incredible sound ecosystem. Every gun feels like it really belongs. It feels strong, and bullet impact feels great. And getting a kill, even with a bullet or two in that game, just feels incredibly satisfying. And so to like have that immersion be breaking because you're shooting peas out of an AK-47 is extremely disheartening. So I can totally see where that sentiment's coming from, Marshall.
One thing I will say that I have found that does feel very rewarding to counteract, I will say the gun sounds I think could definitely see some work, and that's something they could patch. I don't think we need to think that's definite. If that's, I say I definitely encourage people to let the company know that's how you feel about those gun sounds. Let's get those to a place where we're happy with them. But one thing I really like is there's like this melodic building when you get a kill. So if you get kills once, so you get your one kill, it's like duh, and then you get your second kill, it's like duh, and it just keeps rising. And so like if you get those 3 kills in a row, you just get to hear like the do re mi. It feels so good. It feels really good to get those kills.
And you talk about patching too. Riot's not shy about making changes to a game in beta. So we saw Legends of Runeterra has been announcing new cards, a whole bunch of cinematics. So things are subject to change. I mean, it's been in beta for a couple months now, but over the course of those months, I mean, it's like a Hearthstone expansion's worth of cards are being added, and the world feels very, very rich, which I think was one of the complaints with Legends of Runeterra early, is it just felt kind of barren, both in cards and concept. And they've really, really worked hard over these couple months while it was in beta to take some risks and keep adding and building on what was successful. So I have no doubt in my mind that Riot will take feedback and put it into the game, not only with balance, but like things like even sound design too.
Yeah, I mean, we've even last episode we even criticized Runeterra for the amount of cards and synergies that it had, and they've with the release and all their social media team doing like phenomenal like little videos and cinematics have shown us very wrong about that impression.
So as if I'm not going to play devil's advocate here, but I'm going to play outsider concern, I guess. Because again, I've been watching a lot of content from this game, right? I'm unable to get in. And here are the 2 concerns that came to forefront that I want to bounce off of you that not only I've heard, but I've heard other people have concerns about. One is the small pool of operators. So all things considered, I mean, when you're comparing it to like an Overwatch roster, for example, you have 10 playable agents, I believe they're called. And a lot of people are concerned about, not having many options. I mean, especially when you start figuring out the metagame, similar agents being played over and over again. So that's one thing for sure. And then second with that is I've heard people discuss that when you're kind of in like this pre-round limbo when you're buying and stuff like that, a lot of the map is available for you to push up to until those walls drop. So those are kind of the 2 concerns that have been floating around. I've seen them. I've not really sure what to think about them. They're a little bit of a turnoff for me right now, but what are you guys thinking about that? And I'll start off with Ian on that.
Well, if you remember the conversations I was having last week, my biggest worry is the game putting operators in place that do not balance out the gameplay. The biggest of that being, I think, Raze is the biggest talking point right now. I think they will be tweaking her abilities, but I would much rather see a limited champion pool at this point in the game, agent pool. I would much rather see that, just because it'll give people a chance to learn those characters and know what they're capable of and how they're going to affect the game. I think it's really important to understand which pieces of the puzzle your team has and how that's going to affect each site takeover. If you don't have a Viper, ult, that changes the way you could capitalize on a site in a big pivotal round. That's Sage. Sage is on nearly every team comp I play with right now. She has a revive. She has a heal that is remarkably advantageous in early pistol rounds. Like when people don't have shields yet, that health is huge. And she just has that as part of her basic kit. That's not an ult, that's just a heal. I think there are going to be agents like Overwatch that we see almost every game. And I think as long as the other characters feel balanced around that, I'm okay with that. I think we just can't have too many of those that feel like, I don't want there to be any agents that feel like a waste to pick up. I don't want there to feel like, oh, I really like how Omen plays, but is he a waste? Should we have a Sage instead? Should we have this person instead? That's really what worries me.
And before I pass over to Marshall, I will say that my one asterisk with my concern is that of those 10 agents, all of them feel very robust and unique. I mean, for example, I'm looking at it as a spectator. Phoenix looks incredibly cool to just even just spectate. And a lot of the characters' kits and abilities, like there's no overlapping. There's not two characters that will give you a shield or a heal as you move into combat, right? It just feels very robust and everything's very intentional. So at least with a small pool, there's a level of creativity and intentionality going into the design. But Marshall, I want to hear your thoughts on those two concerns I brought up.
So, man, I don't know where to start about this. I don't want to see lots of operators. I think when we talk about, you talked about all the characters feeling very robust, right? And part of that, I talked about sound earlier. Part of that robustness is like the voice lines even that they have. And, you talked about liking Phoenix. It seems very clear that Riot also likes Phoenix, right? And when you were just talking, it reminded me that these agents are almost like how Counter-Strike treats guns, right? Like guns are put on a pedestal in Counter-Strike, like the AWP is, like the AK is. But operators are going to be put on a pedestal in Valorant, right? Like Sage is, like Phoenix is, just because they're so fun to play and like such good character designs. So I think it would be a mistake to take the Overwatch approach and move to like having even 15 operators. A game like Siege has done very well at having lots of operators that are fairly balanced, and changing those operators to make them balanced. But I don't see Valorant overcoming the hurdle of having like 20 operators.
And well, let's also put that or concede that a little bit too, because Rainbow Six has that pool of operators that's pretty expansive, but of those operators, they're all situational, right?
Yeah,
so I mean,
true.
You build your team comp around who you have, but also what map you're playing on, what type of game mode you're playing, and so like.
But what's to say that couldn't happen with Valorant, right?
Oh, I am totally saying that's an option, but again, we'll need to see an expansion not only of the character roster, but in tandem with that, the situations in which they're engaging with each other. Because if it's just a corridor and a gunfight, I mean, you're going to take the same operator every single time, right? But if you're playing a different type of objective or game mode, or even maps with different, types of verticality in a way, it's going to make certain operators stand out, certain agents stand out. So if Riot wants to take an approach, they're going to have to consider what's working well. For example, with Rainbow Six, where they're having different types of interactions between teams that make certain champions stand out.
One thing I would like to, I think this is a good time to bring this up. After playing this game, I've put, I don't know how many hours I've put into it. It's been, the ratio of my life playing Valorant has been sad and alarming right now. But that being said, it has reinforced my suspicion that this game does not feel like Overwatch at all. I think there is some flavor. The Sage's wall, that feels like Maze Wall, right? But what does it feel? Does it affect the match the way Maze Wall does? Absolutely not. It stays up way longer. The way I'm viewing that wall actively as the opponent is I'm viewing it in a way different way I'd ever have viewed May's wall if I were playing against a May in Overwatch. The abilities mean different things in the structure of the match that Valorant offers versus Overwatch. I think the flavor, I can definitely see some originality problems, and I think that has been a big complaint that I've heard rumblings of in the community. But in terms of how it affects gameplay, it's like having these abilities in a CSGO. This game is a tactical shooter. It's going to broaden the genre that CSGO exists in. And I think that's really how in the future, I have a suspicion that's the direction Riot's going to lean in. I'd be surprised if they started integrating more game modes that would make it feel like a different game than a tactical shooter. I could be wrong, and I'm interested to see if they do add those game modes, if they add weird things you'd never see CS add. But and I guess CS does add other game modes. To be fair, they have casual modes, but I wonder if they'd ever add any competitive alternate modes. I'm curious.
Before I send it over to Marshall, I want to get maybe a 15-second elaboration on what are you hearing in terms of grumblings about the originality concept. Is there anything specifically that stands out to you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, one big thing, I've heard people just call Sage's Wall Mage Wall. I hear people call Omen Reaper all of the time. I hear characters just are flavored in a certain way that feel very reminiscent of a lot of character archetypes that we've seen in games like Overwatch, definitely TF2, games like that. I just see a lot of characters that feel like something we've seen recently.
Marshall, are you experiencing the same thing, or do you have other concerns or things that stand out as very positive to you?
No, I mean, the originality, I hear it. I don't know if I particularly care. To me, it's all about like the gameplay. Mm-hmm. If the gameplay is better and I can trust the company and, I want to like their product, it goes a long way. So, I mean, it's sort of like, it's no mistake that the operator is shortened to the op, which sounds a lot like the op, right? I mean, these things aren't mistakes. But it's also like, does that bother me? No. If I was a diehard CSGO fan who really didn't want Valorant to work out because I felt threatened by that community, I would probably not like it, but that's not the case.
But even if that's the case and you're being offended, I don't think Riot's trying to rob CSGO of its diehard fans. I think the opposite. I think that they're convinced that there are people that are going to stick with CSGO, whether or not Valorant's the next big thing or not. But they're looking for the people who might be on the fence, who are looking for something familiar, but feels different, a new experience.
And I
agree.
I would like to add, not only am I thinking that Riot's thinking about, do we want to steal CSGO fans? I think the way they've set up this game is genius in that it feels like I can transfer between the two games anytime I would like to. I went back and played some Counter-Strike, and I felt better. I felt like I was better at Counter-Strike after dumping the hours into Valorant and just refining my aim skill. Like I've just been working that muscle, and I also felt more aggressive with my nades. I viewed them as if they were my abilities. I didn't have those two things separated in my mind. It felt like I was throwing out a smoke as if I were Omen, but it was a tactical smoke grenade. It felt very transferable, and I think it's nice to have, hey, CSGO is going to attract people back with their resources. They're going to make some big change. They're going to have some big tournament that will make people want to play Counter-Strike again. Let's build a game that is easy for them to come back to when we have that big event, when we have that big game mode release. Let's not say, hey, we need to steal the market here. Let's say, let's turn those players into people that can play two games at once instead of dedicate their entire lives to one experience and sink those 4,000 hours into Counter-Strike that people sink into it.
So you're saying, and if I'm hearing you right, that the initial claim that Valorant is the CSGO killer is actually quite the opposite, where the existence of Valorant might be better for the tactical shooter community as a whole.
Probably more of the CSGO brother.
Yeah, CSGO brother. I like that. I think it's not the CSGO killer. Is it going to be a Cain and Abel situation? I don't think so. I think the two brothers can live in harmony.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of move on to something that we alluded to briefly, but I also want to give the opportunity for maybe some closing remarks. So I'll leave 30 seconds before we move off of first impressions to say that in terms of very micro level things, because I'm a little picky when it comes to my games, I love a good user experience. Again, I've only been spectating, so I'll say I haven't had a feel for the game in terms of mechanics, but at least from a spectator standpoint, I love the way the minimap is structured, how you can see vision limitations for all your teammates, how it moves. I've seen even people have a rotating minimap, so wherever way you're looking is like upwards. or like have it rotate when you move around. So I thought that was cool. And even small things like when you're spectating and you switch between operators on your team, there's a small bit of motion blur as if you're whipping to their perspective. And those little things are what, man, it's just Riot shows that they really, really care about their product. And those small details like that do stand out, at least to me, as opposed to, like when you're playing other games, you're clicking through perspectives as your other team's still competing. You're just, jump cutting to other people. It's those small things.
Their jump cuts are very 2012.
It's just oh my god, but I really am finding myself appreciating those smaller details that Riot obviously has taken care of. But I've probably talked for longer than 30 seconds, but 30 seconds to Ian, then Marshall, about some closing thoughts or things you want to touch on before we move on.
I nodded a lot during what you were saying there, and I want to add a few of my own things. Here are some things that I would be surprised if Counter-Strike didn't add after this. Valorant adds your minimum amount of money you'll have next round with your current buy. That's incredible. Knowing that is huge, and I will be surprised if CSGO doesn't add that number somewhere in their interface. Selling after you've bought incorrectly is such an ability. The amount of rounds I've spent in Counter-Strike where someone buys and you just hear the one guy sigh and go, I guess we all have to buy, gone. You don't need to do that anymore. That's just huge, and I think Counter-Strike is going to be forced to respond in some of those very basic ways. Marshall?
Yeah, so I'm just going to reiterate Valorant is what we said about Valorant being the CSGO brother. And I think that while these two companies are competing, while these two companies are competing, it's the viewers that win.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have to consider that. Moving into another perspective, though, we're going to stay on the Valorant train, but we're going to take it from, us guys who are kind of in our rooms playing this game to a more competitive market, because in the news right now, as of 2 days ago, actually, Riot Games made some announcements regarding competitive Valorant. So a lot of people were really hyped up. They're like, what's competitive Valorant going to look like? The LCS is absolutely massive. It's probably the standard for competitive video gaming in a sense. But Riot announced that they're pretty much going to be hands off with their competitive scene as of right now. They unveiled their initial approach, which they said in the press release. They talked to like 100 different esports organizations to kind of get feedback and share their plans. But they pretty much said that they're not going to do anything right now. They gave community guidelines to third-party tournament organizers, so there can be Valorant tournaments very, very soon, or even after its launch. But Riot is not going to have an LCS structure or something like that to their competitive game just yet. And so we'll toss that around for discussion. We'll start with Marshall this time, because Marshall, you probably have the most competitive experience out of all of us.
Yeah, so obviously I spent a lot of time thinking about competitive esports with my coaching position at Aquinas Esports. I am very interested in this. This is a very much hedged bet on Riot's part to not spend massive amounts of money working on a league and promising things that maybe they can or can't follow through with, a lot like what we've seen with the Call of Duty League and Activision's handling of that. So to me, like a lot of things, Valorant is following in CSGO's footsteps, and this model is what I've sort of dubbed like the CSGO model, even though it's probably been done, and it has been done by many other people before. It's the hands-off approach, but we know that Riot is going to come in later. I don't say if this is a success, I say once this is a success, and will incorporate a lot of the things that the community has done and third-party organizations have done, and most likely will franchise like they have with the LCS, the LEC, and the LCK. LPL. I'm not going to go through all of them, but that's my take on this. They're waiting, which is smart.
And Ian, let's get your perspective on this. I know that you said that you weren't entirely familiar, but do you have any initial thoughts you want to before I hop on in?
Yeah, I just will come at it from the approach of the knowledge I have. A lot of the times I will just think of things in terms of how viral will this go, how How big will the reception of this game be? What's the community hype like? Coming from a journalism background in terms of my education, I just like to think about how the masses are viewing this. And I think Riot has the time to kind of sit on deciding all of this because they just have this huge hype wave they can ride right now. Why not just take the time and let the community get the hype, and they have time to spectate and consider what the best approach is for this game competitively. They don't really need to do anything right now. Shroud and Tim the Tatman were the grand finals of this big streamer competitive Valorant tournament that just happened. I believe grand finals were April 14th. Go back and watch those. They were super fun to watch. Shroud had an absolutely stacked Counter-Strike God team, and they won, of course. It was just fun watching CS gods play this game and be very good at it. I think they can just let the community make them money and hype them up right now. Why not? I think they take this time and then they decide, what are we doing competitively, big picture with this?
I entirely agree. And blending both of those perspectives, they have time to linger. I don't think Valorant's going to bust. I don't think the competitive scene is going to fizzle out anytime soon. Riot has proven that they have a strong competitive structure that works, and they will fuel resources into that to make it successful. So again, it's not a matter of if, but when. I like how Marshall phrased that. I also think that this period of time early on gives them some perspective into like what's it going to take to make a competitive Valorant scene good. I mean, they're looking for player base, which, Ian, as you kind of already said, these CSGO gods, could fit right in. If, say, for example, someone is coming out of retirement, there's a player base that maybe didn't fit into CSGO, maybe they didn't make a cut for a team and they want to try their hand at a different game that they're finding success with. I could see a lot of opportunities for fielding competitive players. But also, I mean, League of Legends has had this big issue, especially as of recent, now that they're on ESPN2, of being confusing to watch. I've seen tweets from people who have never been exposed to League tuning on ESPN2 to maybe watch a sports documentary, and they're like, what the hell is going on? Even with the commentators, I feel like I'm watching a car fire. I don't know what to look at. And I think that Valorant fixes that. I mean, it's easier to follow an FPS as opposed to a MOBA, but this kind of delay, this maybe, we're not sure if it's going to be months or years, that Riot's going to give it to third-party organizers before they put their hands on something, I think is a really smart move because it gives them time to get their ducks in a row, as this game is still very much in its infancy.
Yeah. Some of the backlash that I've seen from people in the esports community is that Riot is really just taking advantage of the resources and the work of these third-party event organizers. And to that, I will say yes, and I will also say no, because one of the things you have to look at too is, I called this the CSGO model because it's most easily compared to that, but there's a lot of issues in the CSGO model. I mean, there are teams that a year and a half out after winning tournaments are still not paid, right? And if we're being honest with ourselves, there is not an LCS team that has not been paid for winning, right? So we cannot just look at this from the standpoint of, I don't know, like almost like a 2000s esports, right, where everything is run by and for the community. It's just not like that anymore, and that's not a bad thing that I'm saying. I'm just saying it in the sense that their revenue streams are a real thing. Making sure that people get paid is a real thing, and stability in these franchise leagues are not bad. And while I don't agree with everything that like all the franchise leagues do, named like Owl and CDL, like I'm not a huge fan of like the hometown team thing. I do like the stability that these franchises offer. So,
and to touch on that too, you see stability being a really high point, like you noted, but we're in a position right now where esports in general is going through so much change. I mean, people are still trying to figure out what structures or models work best, and Riot has one that works as of right now, but who says another model won't work better, at least for this specific game? So I think that it's smart on Riot's end to, hold their cards a little close to their chest, at least in this aspect. I'm glad that they've given tools to the community so that they can, still see a satisfied player base, because people want to see this game played competitively. They've given, streamers just a little taste, and now the community is really taking well to it. So at least there's something to hold people off, but I think that it's going to be a while until we see a Riot sanctioned event, but I also think that's for good reason. Ian, do you have any closing thoughts you want to share on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this game has an exciting future in front of itself. And the one thing that is absolutely comforting to Riot, I'm sure, is the one thing that will absolutely always confirm that you have somebody watching your thing is monetary resources. They have the money. They have the money to breathe life into this game if it takes a hit. If it takes something, they have the resources, and it seems like the team, I just want to say, playing this game, it feels awesome. And outside of it being this huge, big, almost heartless corporation that is throwing money at Riot, at the end of the day, the people making the games are the developers, and I think those people have heart and brains, and I think they've made an awesome game. Riot, as long as they just keep having money thrown into Valorant, they can make it work for a while, and I believe that sincerely. So that's what I have to say.
Marshall, I'll give it to you for some final thoughts before we move on.
It's worth saying that, if third-party people are frustrated with not, knowing that it will eventually be taken away from them, more than likely, it's worth even saying that it's crazy that a company allows you to profit off of their IP almost at all. So that in itself should be taken with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. So I think with that, we have discussed Valorant quite thoroughly. We've delved into competitive, casual first impressions. We're going to move on to our final segment of the day, which may come back. It's a recurring segment we're going to call Ping. So for those of you who don't know, a ping in most games is a small bit of information, and we're going to allow all the members of this call here to hop around to some small things that we might have missed during the week, which is video game news has been very dominated by Valorant recently. So we're going to see if we can dive into some other things that might have gone under the radar. And I'll start first to stay at least on the Riot train. Riot has acquired Hypixel, which is another game development studio. They're known kind of for their blocky art style and development, very similar to Minecraft-esque. So at least my little ping focuses on Riot kind of focusing on diversifying their assets. I mean, we know that there's going to be a League of Legends fighting game, I believe an MMO MMO coming out sometime in the future eventually. But Hypixel has been very successful. They have a Minecraft server, or a series of Minecraft servers that have won actually Guinness World Records. And I think that a partnership will only just be another feather in Riot's hat. And hopefully we see, with the development power of Riot right now, paired with another studio that hasn't seen tons of success, but has some proven potential, I see very good things in the future. And so with that, I'll put that to bed and pass the ping mic over to Ian for yours.
Well, Nick, I want to say you did a great job transitioning me into my ping topic for this week, and that is ray tracing. The reason I say that is you mentioned Minecraft, and last night, as we're recording this, today is April 17th. April 16th, I believe, the Minecraft Raytracing RTX beta was actually released. If you want to pick it up yourself, go over to the Xbox Insider Hub. It's something you download off of the Windows Store. You can apply for the beta. You have to have a video card capable of ray tracing, slight barrier of entry. But if you do have one, go over, install that, and you should be screened and given the beta. And then you can go play Minecraft with ray tracing. If you're unfamiliar with ray tracing, instead of the lighting and particle effects being something that is scripted very specifically and follows a code, instead light behaves a lot more like we'd expect it to in real life. And it looks, and it's high res. Light behavior is like something you probably haven't played, unless if you played one of those really popular ray tracing games like Control or the newest Tomb Raider. But this is a great thing for people to experience their first touch of ray tracing with. I did last night. I showed it to you guys a little bit before we hopped on to record today. It was awesome. And I just think it's something that this is what the future of gaming could actually look like. This is something that I think is down the pipeline short term. And I think it's cool to see where that's all heading.
Mm-hmm. But before we move on to Marshall, I will jump in just to say, holy shit. Ian, you had a chance to show us a little bit of gameplay before we hopped on to record this. And let me tell you what, as you were showing us that gameplay, I was downloading the beta. I was so excited to play Minecraft, a game that, despite its early blockiness, it has like kind of this illusion of being a very clean cut game.
Mm-hmm.
Ray tracing makes it feel totally different and very clean and very inviting. And man, I am so excited to crank up some headphones and like turn off all the lights and just no life that for at least a couple hours.
Oh, definitely. And the last thing I want to add before we throw it over to Marshall, when you do download that beta, just run over to the nearest source of water. You're going to have to download a set of worlds that Microsoft will advertise for you very clearly in the marketplace in Microsoft 10's version of Minecraft. But once you get in there, just run to your nearest source of water. Just do it. Just trust me. Marshall, what did you bring today?
So I wanted to bring up the fact that TSM has dropped their Rocket League team, and we have seen a lot of the big, what we consider like tier 1 North American teams, specifically Cloud9 and TSM, TSM actually playing in EU, really struggle in Rocket League recently. The TSM... former TSM team has mentioned that TSM is not looking to pick up more Rocket League players unless it could be someone in the top half of the North American league, and would not have to have their contracts bought out. So currently that looks like nobody.
Mm-hmm. And Marshall, I know that we had you pick up this ping too, because Rocket League very near and dear to your heart. What do you think this says about the scene as a whole?
It's really hard to say. I've wondered for a long time. There's a lot of things we've wondered about Rocket League for a long time. Will they go free to play? Will they franchise? Lots of things, but they just seem to be good with how Rocket League is right now. And there's a lot of smaller organizations that, and bigger ones too, that are making a good name for themselves. It just seems like it's going to keep operating in its current state.
Well, I mean, I only hope the best for Rocket League. It's a diehard community, and I think that it's relatively robust. But I will say, moving on to the last ping of the day, brought to you by yours truly. I'll bring in something that I think that Ian and I especially will find really interesting, kind of with a journalism background. Moving back to the LCS, Doublelift. He's probably one of the biggest, most established names in the LCS. He's played for several seasons. He's probably up there with name recognition like Bjergsen, at least in the NA LCS scene. But he very recently has been supposedly put up for trade by Team Liquid, where he's been for at least a little bit. People don't know where he's going to go, what the implications are. Some people speculate that Tactical, who's kind of his backup, he temporarily replaced Doublelift earlier in the spring season, he might be coming up, but people are speculating that come the summer season, Doublelift may no longer be on Team Liquid. And this actually brought up a bit of controversy in the scene because the LCS, or League of Legends subreddit, actually got rid of several comments made by Travis Gafford, who originally broke the story. So Travis Gafford's a League of Legends journalist. He's worked with tons of people in the scene professionally for years and years and years. And him and Mark Z, who's another caster for the LCS, broke down and discussed this. And he was very confident that multiple sources confirmed to him that he is up for contract trade. Him himself, he's actually friends with Doublelift, I believe. So there's this big limbo. His comments were removed because people don't consider him a journalist, apparently. But the sources, or the journalism outlets that reported on his breaking of the story, were allowed to be on there. So not only is
it's worth noting too that he is actually listed on that subreddit as a credible source. Like, his YouTube channel is listed as a credible source for League of Legends news.
Mm-hmm. And I think this speaks to how sensitive this trade might be, because Doublelift is established. He's beloved. I mean, he is one of the faces of NALCS, I would say, especially having watched from early on season 2 or 3. He's been around the block. And so not only is this big news, but when we're talking esports, I mean, we see this all the time in regular sports. There are personalities who know the game inside and out. They have sources and they get updates by text while they're on shows, and they'll break news like that. But Travis is doing so right now, and he is not being treated like a credible source, which is somewhat concerning. But I mean, we'll have to see. I think these are just growing pains that esports as a whole, LCS included, will have to go through as we move on to serious reporting on the topic. And with that, that brings our show to a close. We've moved through our pings right now. It's a great way to wrap up. Ian, Marshall, do either of you have anything else you want to say? Stuff up?
Yes, I want to say to you, Nick, I hope so badly that you get your Valorant key this week. If I have to come on here next week and hear you again admit to the public that you have yet to get a key, I will be saddened. So if anybody from Riot is listening, if Jeff Bezos or anybody over at Twitch is listening, get this man a key. Get this man a key. That's all I need.
Hey, well, I don't take that very lightly. Marshall, anything from you?
Well, let's just say if I have my beta access revoked next week, it is because I gave Nick my login.
Hey, I appreciate the kind words. The one thing I will say on that, if you're still fishing for your key, support a creator you really appreciate. I know today I've been supporting Afromu. I absolutely love his competitive play for Team Dignitas, both as a player and as a personality. I was supporting Rivington earlier as well. Pick a creator that you're fine with, whether they be, people who attract tens of thousands of viewers or someone who attracts, 50 viewers, because every streamer who has the game can now drop keys. Do something good for the community. Pick out someone you're very comfortable with. And with that, my final PSA out of the way. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Reconnecting. I am Nick Moa-Chowda along with Ian and Marshall. Thank you for all of your support thus far, and we will see you very soon.
Have a good one, guys.